IHSS, it's a continual challenge keeping people staffed, depending on which county you live in. As Tony had mentioned, our county's $7.11 an hour, and living wage up there is probably 10 to 11 an hour. So it's really tough getting quality help and keeping them on IHSS. In my case, I'm a private pay consumer, and it's still a challenge. Basically, I pay 12 to 15 an hour, which is almost double what they're making on IHSS, and it's still a juggling act trying to get the right person that's not just money oriented. You really need a person that's puts the care first and then the remuneration afterward, which is like any job in particular. I haven't had much of an issue in keeping help. I have 2 providers, so I avoid the burnout factor. Although I do live in a rural community, and sometimes if it snows, they can't get to me, as in yesterday I stayed in bed all day.
I was going to say, living in a more rural environment, of course you have fewer people in the labor force, so it's probably even more difficult than, say, in San Francisco or another urban environment, to find caregivers who are basically could be trained to be good at what is required.
Right. Many times folks have to rely on neighbors as a backup system, or family, if they have those, and it's a real problem. And in Patrick's situation, as he mentioned yesterday, we had snow up in the foothills, and so the person that was going to come and help him get out of bed couldn't get there, and that's a real issue. And if he was trying to work somewhere, that could be a problem if he had a job where he had to get there at a certain time. And the other issue is finding somebody who's there when the maximum hours are 9.4 a day, and you have somebody with a sore or needs some constant attention, then they end up going in the hospital. And we have a friend who's now been in the hospital well over a month to take care of a sore and to deal with the residual effects of not having someone in there enough hours to help him with his needs. And that's costing the taxpayer a whole lot more than...
Right. It sounds like another kind of penny wise and pound foolish decision.
I think what we need to do is find ways to entice people that this is an interesting job, that you get to know somebody while you're working with them in a way that no other job really offers. But also maybe as a training or a stepping stone onto or into other professions that are health related. Maybe have it like part of some of the curriculums that students are going through, but find ways where we make it and incorporate it more into our society, that this is a worthwhile job, and also increase the pay. I know that up in Yolo County, they have just negotiated a salary that's $10.25 an hour, so that makes it more enticing. However, the problem is still recruiting providers. So.
Are you aware of any programs, say at community colleges, for example, to sort of, as you say, prepare people for a path into caregiving that may later lead into, say, nursing or something of that respect, but at least, it provides sort of a basis for what sounds like could be a very fulfilling career, or at least, a job for several years.
Yeah, depending on the community, some colleges have nursing programs, and they'll encourage folks to work as an in-home service worker to get some basic training and see if it's what they really want to do. In Western Nevada County, which is the Grass Valley, Nevada City area, we work with the local adult ed program to help recruit folks for their classes, and also we'll go and talk to the classes. We'll be there as support. So it's an annual class. It's not every semester, but it's been very helpful to work with the adult education program.
This speaks to also the issue that consumers need to be aware in their community of what I call it a cyclical nature of when help will be most available. I live in a university community, so it changes every quarter. There's summer vacation, there's spring break, there's Christmas vacation, there's holidays. And each of these requires either somebody who's going to be there during that time, or you have to say, well, you know, you need to work this particular day and somebody else will work that day. But you have to really, the consumer has to be very aware of how their community functions on a yearly basis.
That's a very good point. I mean, you know, we tend, I think, to forget about things like snow or school schedules, you know, that people tend to not think about, and in fact create scheduling nightmares, I imagine.
Right. And so the person with a disability, I think that any training that we do, we really need to train consumers in how to manage and direct and be the best manager that they, you know, that they can be in order to be able to live with personal care assistance. It's a very complex issue, and every time there's a change in your schedule, it just throws you out of kilter until you can get a new person in there trained, and then building up trust with that person.
Well, those are all excellent points, and thank you for joining us for this segment of the Better Care Forum. Please stay with us. We're going to have a further discussion shortly. And Welcome back to the Better Care Forum discussion with our guests Patrick, Tony, and Nancy. And we've been addressing some of the issues of caregivers. And I know that some of the downsides we've talked about in terms of cost and so on. And I think that our audience also might like to hear about some of the achievements that are capable if in-home support services are supported by the community and by the state. And I'm curious, sort of just some personal stories of what having support services has allowed our guests to accomplish.
I can start on that. I've been using personal care assistance since I was 19 years old, and the original aid to families with dependent, or aid to disabled, totally disabled persons allowed me to get an education. And for somebody with the severity of my disability, an education was really the route to being able to even get a job. I'm very lucky that I am one of the people with a disability who has been able to work. This year will be my 30th year. Amazing to say, but we need to look at the picture of the United States, and 70% of people with disabilities are unemployed, particularly people with severe disabilities, and those with severe disabilities who are working are not able to work for very many years. And so there are some, well, this is a success story. There are challenges. One is to get up and go to bed every morning and every evening, which the in-home support services program has made it possible for me, because personal care assistance represents an enormous cost to an individual. And also, it's made it possible for me to participate in the community. It's made it possible for me to have a quality of life, to get married. But all of these things have really have hinged upon my ability to get personal care assistance.
And I can maybe elaborate on that. In California, we have AB 925, which is a kind of a back to work initiative for people with disabilities, and it's really about the high unemployment rate for folks with disabilities who want to be in the workplace, and what can the state do to support that. We also have the Olmstead Advisory Committee, which is a statewide committee looking at ways to transition folks out of nursing homes in the community, and with that, the supports to go to work. Yeah. If someone's going to work, whether it's 4 hours a day, 6 hours, 8 hours a day, if they have a disability, they need those supports to be able to get up in the morning, as Nancy said, to have meals prepared for them, to have their house usable when they get home from work,
And to have transportation.
and to have transportation, which
Get
is
to and from work.
a whole nother issue. So, we have to really look at the full spectrum. And if we don't have these support services, folks, one, are staying home. If there's no IHSS, they're not even home, they're in institutions, which are far more expensive than living in the home in their own community, and definitely a lot less poor quality of life.
Could you just expand just briefly on Olmstead and its significance for in-home support services?
Sure. The word Olmstead is basically a Supreme Court decision, 1999, which mandated that states look at their plan, and it's called an Olmstead plan. And California has a plan, although it's being updated and revised on what it's doing to divert people from nursing homes and get people out who choose to be out of nursing homes. And it's a comprehensive group. I believe there are around 30 of us, very diverse people throughout the state, looking at what the barriers are and what's working. There are programs that are working in certain counties and certain communities, and trying to replicate those throughout the state, looking at other states' models and bringing those to California, examples of it, and also trying to get federal money diverted from nursing homes into the community, because it is far more cost effective and the quality of life is so much better when people choose to live, get to live where they choose.
And one of the things about the in-home support services is that this is a very cost-efficient program. We hear grumblings about, there's so much money being spent on the program, but in reality, it's very cost-effective.
I'm curious if there's, I just don't know, maybe if there's a catch-22. If you receive support services from a public authority, for example, and are able to go back to work, are you in jeopardy then of making too much money to qualify?
Depends on which program you're on from the standpoint of assistance. I'm not sure if the numbers are up to date now, but if you were on SSI or SSDI and you made more than $790 a month, and it may be more now, then yes, you would lose your benefit.
Yeah, and there is a share of cost up to a certain point, but there definitely is a built-in disincentive to go to work, and that's one of the problems that AB 925 was looking at, and we're looking at the Olmstead Committee is, if somebody goes to work, how can we get rid of the disincentives and figure out a way, and yes, if somebody's making $100,000 a year, they probably don't need to be on IHSS, but if they're making $20,000, it's going to cost them more to work than if they stayed off and stayed on SSI, which is Supplemental Security.
We really need to build incentives to help people go to work and to help people stay at work. It's much more productive for the community and for the individual with a disability as well as their family.
Well, as you were saying, if the purpose, and it is the purpose, to allow people to have choices as to where and how they live, to then put up, you can say, you can work if you want to, but if you do, you'll be penalized. It's sort of one more barrier to achieving full independence for people.
Which is the current situation today.
In the early 90s, Ed Roberts, who was considered the father of the independent living movement, he was a respirator using quadriplegic. He mentioned that for him to work, it would cost about $75,000. This is early 90s to be able to afford to live like he could live if he was getting SSI. So we've got to get some incentives. And he was able, he had a PhD, he was able to earn that kind of income, but very few people can do that. So we need to, you're right, bridge that gap.
Most Americans don't earn that much less people with disabilities. So, well, thank you for joining us for this evening's Better Care Forum discussion of caregivers and strategies for success with people with disabilities. We're looking forward to having you with us in future episodes as a Better Care Forum explores further strategies for success. And I want to thank you guys for having a really interesting discussion.